Wings of Sacrifice, A Mother's Journey. The story of Aisha is not one of wealth, privilege, or ease, but one of resilience, sacrifice, and unbreakable love. Aisha had always dreamed of a peaceful life. Growing up in a small town, she was taught that love and hard work were the pillars of a strong family. When she married Imran, she believed her life was set, a humble but happy home, where she and her husband would build a future together. Imran worked as a mechanic, and though the money was never abundant, they had enough to keep the house running. Aisha, a devoted mother, stayed home to care for their two children, Sarah and Omar, pouring every ounce of love into their upbringing. For years, life followed this steady rhythm, until the day everything changed. One cold evening, Imran came home exhausted, barely able to stand. His hands, once strong and steady, trembled as he held his dinner spoon. Concerned, Aisha urged him to see a doctor. What was supposed to be a routine checkup turned into their worst nightmare. Imran was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder. The disease progressed rapidly, stripping him of his ability to work. Overnight, their world collapsed. The sole provider of the family could no longer earn. Medical bills piled up, rent became an unbearable weight, and Aisha found herself standing at the edge of a financial abyss. But she did not crumble. With trembling hands and a heart full of fear, Aisha made a decision: she would become the provider. She had never worked a day outside her home, but she was willing to do anything for her children and her husband. She knocked on doors, asked neighbors for work, but opportunities were scarce. Without a formal education or experience, no one was willing to hire her. The rejection stung, but they only made her more determined. One evening, as she watched her children sleep, she made a silent promise: I will not let them go hungry. The struggle begins. With whatever little savings they had left, she bought a small cart and began selling homemade snacks on the streets. Waking up at 4 a.m., she prepared samosas, tea, and parathas. She stood for hours under the scorching sun, calling out to passing customers, her feet aching, her back sore, but she never stopped. At first, the earnings were barely enough to cover a meal. Some days, she returned home with only a few coins, but even then, she smiled in front of her children. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would ever be able to give them a better life. The world was not kind to a struggling woman. Men sneered at her for working on the streets. Some mocked her, others tried to take advantage of her vulnerability. But Aisha had no time for fear. She had mouths to feed. There were days when exhaustion consumed her, when she wanted to break down and cry, but she never allowed her children to see her pain. She would wipe her tears before stepping into their home, always greeting them with a warm H. Months passed, and slowly, her hard work began to bear fruit. A kind-hearted shopkeeper allowed her to set up a small stall in front of his store. Her food became popular, and customers returned not just for the taste but for the warmth she radiated. One evening, a businessman stopped by her stall. Impressed by her dedication, he asked if she had ever considered expanding her business. Aisha hesitated; she had never dared to dream that big. But he offered her a small loan, interest-free, and encouraged her to take the leap. It was a risk, but she took it. With the loan, she rented a tiny space and turned it into a small tea shop. She learned the basics of managing a business, and soon, people started coming in not just for tea, but for the inspiring woman who ran the place. Her children, who once saw their mother struggle, now saw her thrive. They studied hard, knowing the sacrifices she had made for them. Years passed, and the tea shop grew. Aisha was no longer just a struggling mother, she was a respected businesswoman. She hired other women in need, offering them the support she once wished she had. One evening, as she stood behind the counter, watching her now healthy husband sip tea and their children help with the business, she realized she had won. She had once feared the darkness of poverty, but now she had created her own light. Her story was no longer one of survival. It was a testament to the power of a mother's love, to the strength of the human spirit, and to the belief that even in the worst storms, one can find wings to rise. She was no longer just Aisha, the struggling wife. She was Aisha, the woman who refused to give up.